Hello. This is the Zen Interviews podcast. I'm Zen Master Sebastian Rizzon, founding master of the Zen Art Center and the Mind Light Way School of Zen Arts. This week I'll be taking questions from one of the Zen Art Center community members, Nadia, and she will be just asking me anything that's on her mind this week. So, with that said, let's jump right into the questions. What's on your mind this week?
So I want to talk about the spiritual journey, the ups and downs, and more importantly, the fact that it is not a linear process. And I guess let's start with that. What can you say about the spiritual journey and the fact that it is not linear? And I guess encourage people to just keep going. Because my point is that my own experience going or on this spiritual journey, my own experiences, sometimes there are ups where I feel like there is progress, and sometimes there are downs where I feel I'm regressing. But most of the time, I don't see any progress.
You know, it's very personal. I think it sometimes works more like steps more than a linear transition towards a goal, going upwards in a certain direction. I think a lot of times it works in steps where you have breakthroughs and then it feels like a plateau where you're not making progress, or sometimes even in decline, even though you're working hard, things don't seem to be going the way you would expect them to. It's fair to expect all of those things along the spiritual journey. Yeah, and I don't think you can really project what your trajectory is going to be. Just because you want everything to be better doesn't mean that everything is going to happen as you are wishing. There's always going to be challenges in life that come up that set you back or knock you off course. So it's very important to stick with it and maintain your practice. That's what I primarily am trying to impart to people with most of my teaching, is that consistency is the most important element to your own spiritual practice and spiritual journey. Making sure you're practicing every single day. I teach primarily forms of Zen meditation, which includes sitting meditation and moving meditation. So what I'm trying to teach people is to practice sitting meditation and to try to turn all of your actions into a meditation so that you're consistently meditating throughout the day, keeping your mind clear, and then you can keep your focus on where you're trying to direct your life.
So how do you know that whatever you're doing, like sitting meditation or whatever it is, how do we know that it is working? Especially in those moments where there is a feeling of, oh, I've been meditating for so long and I'm still getting upset about this.
Yeah, I don't think it's like waving a magic wand. So if you are treating it like that, I think that's an unfair expectation of your practice. The idea is to practice these tools so that they work better for you. It's like practicing playing music. The more you practice, the better you get at it, the better you can play no matter what your mood is. It's the same thing I learned through practicing martial arts. Some days you feel good, some days you don't feel good. But if you're practicing all the time, even your worst days get better. So I think it's important to maintain that practice, to learn how to trust your tools, so that you can use them in a time when you're distressed. Because a lot of time when you're in a state of distress, it's really hard to remember that you can count on these tools as a way to break the momentum of the distress. Because a lot of times otherwise it just starts to snowball in your mind. So meditation is a way you can stop that momentum. And if you're incorporating it into your routine every day, you'll have a point where you're breaking all of your momentum from everything you're doing and clearing your mind. So at the temple, we used to bow and chant and meditate in the mornings. That meant every single morning I was going to be doing this routine, clearing my mind and giving myself a break from all of the mental activity that's filling my mind throughout the day. And that practice over time makes your mind more clear and more clear and more clear. But on a day-to-day basis, you still have things come up. You know, I've had people I know pass away in that time frame. Like, that causes distress, but it is a way to kind of give you a break from even your sorrow in those types of situations. And that's just one extreme example. There's plenty of things happening at work, things happening with your family, arguments with your friends. Those types of things can spiral in your mind and create more momentum. And oftentimes you'll respond to those issues in a way that makes them bigger than they need to be. And so if you're clearing your mind, you can respond appropriately and not cause the situation to keep escalating.
So would you say that self-discipline is an important ingredient on the spiritual journey because of the nature of it, because it is not linear, because you're not going to see progress every single day, that there is something that you need to keep pushing yourself to just do the routine, no matter what?
Yeah, I think especially in the very beginning, self-discipline is an important element to establishing the routines. I think once you establish a consistent routine, it becomes like going to work. Does it require self-discipline to go to work? Or brushing your teeth? Does it require self-discipline to brush your teeth? To a certain extent, yes. But after you've done it for a while and it's part of your routine, you don't even think about it. And you don't think about it as this is a disciplined activity, even though it is in some way. But I think the key is establishing the consistency in your life, which is why I usually suggest just creating a small routine for yourself that is possible, even if it's just meditating 1 minute a day when you wake up, so that you can incorporate that into your routine. And then you can expand off that, but always just try to do, commit to something every day.
Like baby steps.
Baby steps, exactly.
So for someone who's just starting with meditation, is there like a certain number of days after which this process starts, they would start to seeing some sorts of results for the process, and a length for a meditation that makes sense? Or does 1 minute make sense?
I don't think it's probably good to say you should expect something after 10 days or 100 days. I think that might create unrealistic expectations, and that idea, if it doesn't happen, will create a feeling of failure. So I think it's just more important to establish a routine. It's going to be different for everybody. I think everybody watching this is coming from a different place in their life. What makes sense to you? Can you do a minute? Can you do 5 minutes a day? 1 minute a day is literally 7 minutes a week. I think everybody watching this can do that. But also, if you want to keep making progress, you want to try to expand that. But always at least do the minimum that you set for yourself, and carve out that part of your day that's especially committed for doing your own practice, for maintaining your progress on your own spiritual journey. And rather than set expectations, just notice what's changing in your life. After 10 days, are things getting better? Do you notice a difference? After 100 days, do you notice a difference? I think that kind of awareness of how you are changing will create a positive feedback loop.
I think most of the people are also very critical of themselves. And just to comment on noticing what's happening in your life, I guess my comment is to do it in a loving way toward yourself. Instead of like, oh, I'm not there, or instead of seeing what's not there, looking at it from what's there and in a loving eye toward yourself.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think it's important to have compassion towards yourself, that you're trying to help yourself, you're trying to improve your situation, so that the self-critical elements don't take over your thought process. I think it's really important as a teacher to be patient, because if you're teaching your students, everybody has their own path and their own rate of change and their own rate of success, if you will. And I think you need to exhibit that same type of patience towards yourself when you're trying to teach yourself something and trying to incorporate a new routine into yourself. That's something I saw, with my teacher. He was very strict and insisted on a certain amount of discipline if you're living in the temple. But he was also patient. If you faltered, he would remind you that you faltered, but also stick with you, reminding you, no matter how many times you faltered, to stick with it and to keep going and to get back on the routine. And I think that's what I've learned, which has helped me incorporate all of these practices into my life outside of the temple as well. That does kind of bring up one other thing I'd like to mention, is that having some sort of community that helps encourage you, helps inspire you along that way, helps keep you on the path. Not just the teacher, but people around you who are trying to do similar things with their life, and becoming a part of that community. And it becomes an easier way to make yourself accountable, because you'll just enjoy being part of the community, but it also kind of is another way that all of these things start to get incorporated into your routine.
Yes. So let's take a moment to talk about community, Sangha, right?
Sangha is what it's called in Sanskrit.
And starting by noting that the community is, the Sangha part is an important part of different religions and spiritual practices, and even beyond, because we're human beings and we need that kind of, we need community. We're community species, I guess. So how would you say, and you started talking about it, but I guess in more details, what is the role of a community? Why is it so popular in the East? And how would you say, I guess, that it is even more important here in the West, where people feel more lonely than other areas in the world?
We are social creatures, so community is important to us just for our health and well-being overall, regardless if you're in the Western culture or the Eastern culture. I think certain cultures definitely emphasize community more, and I think Western culture does allow you to, with technology and things like that, it allows you to operate on an individual level pretty well, in a way that you're not forced to rely on your community. But I think that makes it more important to have a community that you enjoy being a part of. In Buddhism, the three pillars of Buddhism are called the three jewels. The first is Buddha, who's the enlightened teacher, the Dharma, which is his teachings about the truth of nature and the nature of truth, and the third is Sangha, which is the community and the meditation community. I tend to think of community as in a broader way, but that's how it was traditionally viewed in Buddhism, as one of the three most important things in your practice.
So why is it so important, to the point that it is one of the three jewels?
It's where your encouragement and strength to stick with this process comes from. It's where your support comes from. It's where your encouragement comes from. It can come from your teacher. It can come from the teachings. So it's kind of like a three-pronged approach. It's like a teacher prodding you to continue on and to challenge yourself, the teachings pointing you in the direction you're supposed to go, and the community supporting you along the way on your journey.
Yeah, and it is not an easy journey, and at many times it can feel very alone, very lonely process. Which it is by the nature of it. But I guess having a community where you can see that everybody is working toward the same goal or having the same challenges stumbling, falling, and then picking themselves up, it gives you something to hold on to. Because sometimes the teacher is so far ahead that having someone who's not that far ahead is helpful too.
Yeah, I agree. When I first met my teacher, he was so beyond where I was. I thought he had magical powers.
Yeah.
But it turns out he was just human. And after getting to know him for many years, I knew that very well. But he still had, he seemed to navigate these difficulties with so much more ease. And I think it's important to have, people at your level and people incrementally along the way who have been through the same trials that you've been through and the same challenges to help have them offer you, their perspective on things. Because often, like with my teacher, he could just see, obviously, oh, you need to fix this, but in a certain way, it would seem like too difficult for me at a certain point, and then, or maybe I didn't understand some of the context of why it was important, and a lot of times that's where I could get that inside the community I was a part of.
So now, do you think there is a difference between an online community and an in-person community?
There obviously is a difference. There's definitely a different kind of exchange when you're near someone and you can more directly feel the energy that they're making. You can pick up on certain nuances that you don't necessarily get on a computer screen. But I think an online community can be very useful in a lot of ways. So I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with that. I think it's a great way. I mean, I think people don't have access to things in their local community. I grew up in Vermont. There are very few Buddhists up there. I'm not even sure where the closest Buddhist community would have been. So I found out about these things by reading books, and I tried practicing it from reading books, but I was never very successful until I came to the city and found my teacher, within a block of where I lived, where I was able to immerse myself in the community and get direct teaching from him. I also grew up prior to the internet, so I didn't have, there was no such thing as an online community, so I didn't have the benefit of that, but I probably would have been eager to find other people thinking like me when I didn't see a lot of them in my community where I grew up.
So I grew up with the internet. And I think what, like a word of caution, or maybe you can talk about it, is you can find literally every single type of advice out there. And it can get difficult and dangerous sometimes. It can get difficult to sort through what actually makes sense, what doesn't make sense, who's like saying something that has some kind of, who has credibility, who does not have credibility. It's hard to tell just out there from the internet. That's one thing. The second thing is also for in-person communities. What would you say would be helpful for someone who's looking for this kind of community? And let's just call it either online or in person. What should that person look for when they're researching what type of community works best for them?
Yeah, that's a difficult one for me to answer. I think it's a very personal choice. I think for many years I was looking for someone to help me navigate these types of things. And I didn't have a formula for how to do it, nor do I think I can really offer one. But I think you are right. There's reasons to be cautious. There are all kinds of things on the internet. People just doing things for all different reasons. Some of it could be just exploitative to make money. There's a lot of marketing tricks and gimmicks people use to get you hooked on their content, because that's the game of making money. So I think there's plenty of reason to be cautious. I think just finding someone whose message resonates with you, who feels sincere. I think sincerity is very important. Do they sincerely want to help you or the people that they're speaking to? So those would be things I would be looking for. Really, just how does their teaching resonate with you? What are they saying? Does it make sense? does it fill the void that you're looking to fill? Yeah, I'm hesitating even as I say some of this, because I think, some of these marketing gimmicks can artificially do that in a way that's not really going to bring you progress. But I think self-evaluating along the path, and that's why I'm primarily trying to teach people just to learn how to clear their own mind so that they can find out what the true path for themselves are. I'm not trying to give them a formula or a prescription that you do these 10 things and your life changes. It's more about, if you clear your mind, you'll understand what's important for you to do in your next step, and that's going to lead you to where your heart is trying to push you in that direction.
Yeah. So my own personal experience regarding that is, it always bugs me when I hear or read something that goes along the line of, do you want to learn how to manifest your first $10,000 in a month? Do this, and then you have to pay $200 per month to access some sorts of training to be able to do that. And it just bothers me because it doesn't feel authentic, and it doesn't feel like someone is really trying to help someone. It feels like someone is trying to make money out of someone's fear, or out of someone's despair, or out of someone's low point in life, and using that as a marketing technique. So basically working on emotions to get you to take action, and the action is like paying something to have access to a training or whatever. And I'm not saying that it's bad all the time. And to your point, where if someone has a clear mind, then they can clearly see, is it going to be of value, where I don't mind paying $200 a month to get that kind of value, but I know that this is my value? Or am I just doing it because I feel so desperate that I'll do anything?
Yeah, and I think those are important things to consider. Anytime someone is asking a lot of money for something, I would want to examine why. And I think being honest with yourself about what you're looking for. Are you looking for a shortcut? Because you don't get spiritual fulfillment through taking shortcuts. A lot of times it takes a certain amount of reflection on your own behavior to understand what you need to change. And that's why I think having a teacher you can trust, in that they have your best interests in mind, not just lining their pockets. I mean, everybody needs money to survive. Even the teachers, they need to figure out some way to make a living if they want to have time to teach. So I'm not trying to say you can't charge for things. I think it's just important that when you go into those kind of arrangements, that you understand very clearly what you're trying to get out of it. And also evaluate if whatever you're paying for is delivering. In my tradition, we teach the dharma for free, and we rely on only donations. So I don't have any kind of paid courses or anything like that. I'm trying to make it clear that that's not my motivation. However, I do rely on donations, and I expect that if people are getting value in their own lives out of this, if they're able to, that they can make a donation. So I think it's a hard thing to balance, because we do live in a society which is based on capitalism, meaning you have to have money for everything you want to do. So you have to balance those realistic pressures of life and being able to maintain a school and teach. And I think there's nothing wrong with asking a reasonable amount for a service. But if their advertising is presenting you with some sort of shortcut to manifesting something or spiritual enlightenment, I think that's a big red flag. And you might want to examine that, and also ask yourself some questions about what you expect you would get out of that.
Yeah. Like, there's nothing in life that's worth having that comes easily, and everything that's worth having comes with a lot of work and a lot of practice and a lot of time and effort. Yeah, and as you said, shortcuts are generally not taking you where you want to be.
Yeah, things can happen quickly for some people, but for most people, to change your direction and to change the way you're going, it requires a real sincere effort from yourself.
Sounds good. That's about it for today. Those are all the questions I had.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for your questions. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit with me and ask me these really thought-provoking questions. I will just say, if anybody in the watching online has any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments or drop them in the chat. We'll try to incorporate these into future interviews, and we're always looking for good questions. And thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Nadia, for joining us. And have a great day.